companies, right? Yes. So excited to have Zach here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I want the viewers to hear about your history, the legacy of truck driving in your family, and why you're getting into regulation and legislation a little bit.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Malcolm and Julie. My name is Zach Meiborg. I'm the owner and CEO of the Meiborg companies. Very proud third-generation driver, with my son being a fourth-generation driver. He was part of the SDAP program. That was a great program that our FMCSA put on. Here today to talk about the fix for all trucking. We have a lot of buzz going on in our industry, particularly about new rules coming out. We had the Ghost Truck Act introduced by Florida legislator. We've got the Delilah's Law. We've got the SCOTUS ruling. These are all great, but they address symptoms of our problem. And the real problem in trucking is we're regulated by hours of service that are 91 years outdated. Yeah, you heard me right. The hours of service rule initially came out in the 1935 Transportation Act, which is kind of wild to think. Trucking was wildly different in 1935.
100%.
I mean, we didn't have CBs, you didn't have radios, you didn't have power steering or air conditioning, right?
ELDs.
The ELDs, exactly. The ELDs are not the problem. The real problem in trucking all boils down to our 60, 70-hour rule in trucking. So if you take that 70-hour rule and you divide it out by 8 days, you limit a truck's productivity to 8.75 hours of productivity per day. Now, we were talking a little bit offline, but what other industry is regulated that you can only work 8.75 hours, then you must drop the pen and walk away from the desk? It doesn't happen, right? And so trucking is unreasonable with that. Now, within a 24-hour period, we're already allowed to work 14 hours in a day and then a mandatory 10 off. And so my good friend, Dale Prax from Freight Validate, and I have submitted a notice of rulemaking to the FMCSA, Department of Transportation, and it's in policy review right now, but we're really campaigning hard to update a 91-year-old regulation and just simplify our hours of service. This fixes all problems with trucking. Give us 14 hours on duty. That would include driving or anything truck related, and then a mandatory 10 consecutive off. Wow. This increases the productivity of a truck, thereby reducing the cost to operate that truck. You know, a lot of us are scratching our heads at why these foreign-owned and operated competitors in our industry are able to just beat the pants off of us compliant trucking companies, legacy companies that have been around for 40, 50, 60 years in America. And the reality is, it's because there's a massive incentive to break the rules, and there's no compliance enforcement for overseas. But we don't fix that by policing the world. What we do is we stop and we think, is the regulation reasonable? And I'll argue till we're blue in the face that 8.75 hours is not reasonable for a licensed professional to operate a commercial motor vehicle. Give them 14 hours on and then 10 off. Trust that licensed professional, who's not incentivized, of course, to crash the truck or cheat the rules, to do his job and then park it safely and take a 10-hour break.
So is the main change then to break it down simple for people who don't? Hours of service seems simple, but it's really
it's complicated. It is not simple.
So is it really just removing the 36-hour reset?
See, that's how complicated it is, right? It's a 34-hour reset.
See, I was on just 2 hours reset.
No, because today we're regulated by this. Within a 14-hour period, within 24 hours, you're allowed 11 hours to drive that truck. Now, within 11 hours, you have to stop and take a 30-minute break between 3 and 8 hours. There's a 16-hour exemption.
Never only 30 minutes. We talked about that.
Yes, exactly. It's never 30 minutes because you got to pull off, you got to stop, and usually you try to time it with your fueling, which is technically illegal, but everyone does it. But the reality is, you're going to get behind a guy who's taking a shower in the fuel island, and now you've got your 30-minute break stretched out to an hour break. But everyone's rushing to beat that 8.75-hour clock, which doesn't make any sense. Within a 24-hour period, we're already allowed to work 14 hours. And I say this with conviction. I'm a third-generation truck driver. Easiest part of the job and the most rewarding part of the job is holding that steering wheel going down the road. Let the licensed professional decide what he wants to do during that 14 hours. Get rid of the 70-hour rule, get rid of the 60-hour rule, get rid of the 30-minute break, get rid of the 16-hour exemption. And we already have sectors of our industry that have done this for years, dozens of years. In fact, oil and gas, totally hours of service exempt. Agriculture, totally hours of service exempt. Now we have this new fertilizer exemption. If you're hauling anything to do with fertilizer, you get 16 hours to drive a truck. It's time we stop and we think about this. Does a 91-year-old regulation from 1935 make sense to regulate an industry in 2026? Dale Prax and I absolutely think no. And what we're seeing today is the byproduct or the symptoms of this outdated regulation manifesting problems all over our industry, right? We had the SCOTUS ruling, which is great, but it's a step forward to bringing shippers and brokers into some sort of compliance instead of this willful ignorance, right? That's going to take 5 or 10 years to permeate through our industry. What we need is a fix now, and that fix comes with a 1410. Some of the things that it fixes, it increases driver pay.
Okay.
Productivity directly correlates to wages. This is an economic law. Happy to take callers on this or any hate mail you want to send my way, but productivity directly correlates to wages. And so
100%.
like the more you work, the more you're going to make, whether you're hourly or mileage or percentage. It's as simple. So we're going to go from a limitation of 70 hours by 8 days or 8.75 hours of productivity to 14 a day. Driver wages are going to go up. The next biggest thing, and this is a real big thing, is parking. This is going to decrease the need of every truck to park by 5.25 hours, or up to 5.25 hours per day. Now, we're all proud of DOT because they just appropriated $200 million for parking, right?
Yes, they did.
And so the average parking spot for a tractor trailer costs $30,000 a year. That's just shy of 7,000 parking spaces. Good job. However, if we change the hours of service rule from a limited 8.75 hours of productivity today to a 14 on, that would be the equivalent of adding 40,000 parking spots or $12 billion of parking appropriations. Okay. And all because we're just updating a regulation. This allows drivers to get to their shippers and receivers, to park there overnight. This allows drivers to get home when they're only an hour away from home, right? And they can get good rest in their bed instead of out on the road where dispatch is stringing them out. This also brings pride back to our industry. Right? The compliant truck driver can now compete against the non-compliant cheaters that are out there. 100%. And we know they exist. There's a reason there's 1,000 different ELD providers on the market today. And yes, FMCSA is doing a great job because they've eliminated 50 non-compliant ELDs since the beginning of the year. But we still have hundreds of fraudulent ELDs that allow for people to erase their hours of service nightly to get booted out of the market. And the self-certification is a problem, but I don't know how DOT is going to fix that because by virtue of computer code, you can always update and change computer code. So what you do is you make the regulation more reasonable, and that is a 14 on, 10 off. Stroke of a pen fixes it.
Okay, so I want to talk about, you just brought it up, ELDs being revoked or compliant.
Yeah.
So walk us through the process of what that looks like. And when an ELD is revoked, what then happens, and is that process fair currently?
Yeah. So Rockford, Illinois is outside of Chicago. Proud to say Rockford's a great town. Chicago has brought a lot of fraud into our industry. That doesn't mean every company from Chicago is fraudulent,
of course,
but we all know this. I have plenty of friends that are in the consulting sector of our industry, and they've been at these companies when their ELDs were revoked. And when their ELDs get revoked, the same chameleon carrier concept now exists in the ELD world. So, and you can see this. If you go on FMCSA's website and you look up approved ELD providers, you'll see there's companies with 4 or 5 approved ELDs listed, and they're all registered to the same address. Countryside, Illinois, Austin, Texas, you name it. Pick up the phone, you call them, and they're definitely from overseas. You call them and you ask them, and they're from overseas. They'll tell you that straight up. What happens is when you're driving along as a truck driver and your dispatch is telling you to get there and you know you're running a non-compliant ELD and that ELD is caught, FMCSA comes in and shuts that E-log down. They give the carrier 60 days notice to switch to a new ELD provider. And then they tell the carrier, if you can't find a new ELD, it's okay. We'll let you run paper. Guys, this is wrong. This does not incentivize compliance, and it definitely disincentivizes profitable compliance. if we want a fair marketplace, and fair means equal treatment, not equal outcome, right? If we want a fair marketplace, when that e-log provider is found to be fraudulent or manipulating hours of service, tampering with drivers' hours, shut it down right then, put a cease and desist order or a shutdown order to that company, that carrier that's using it. Don't give them 60 days to choose a new vendor. But I do got to say this, they're pretty smart. Right? It only takes them about an hour to download their entire client list and re-upload one of their Chameleon ELD schemes to that tablet, and that truck is back up and operating within an hour. So DOT has a muddy uphill battle ahead of them on the ELD fraud. We can fix that by taking the wind out of the sails of the fraudulent companies by incentivizing profitable compliance. And we do that simply by changing the hour service to a 14 on, 10 off only. Get rid of all the other rules. Another thing it does, Julie, is it drives down our cost, right? So we have substantial overhead costs and fixed costs in trucking. So the more miles you drive, the more hours you drive, the more you can dilute that overhead cost. Now, I've done the math on this, and my math is not perfect. I'm not an accountant, but when we're all buying the same stuff, we're buying the same fuel, we're buying the same tires, we're really competing for the same drivers, and we're buying the same trucks and trailers, right? The only thing that changes is your denominator, how many miles or how many hours you're dividing it
Utilization.
by.
Yep.
And you could go on Facebook Marketplace where they're advertising to hire drivers and see there's ads out there. Solo driver hiring at 4,500 miles a week. You know that driver is not doing that compliantly. You cannot run 4,500 miles a week compliantly.
There's no way.
Back to back to back. In fact, you could do 2,500, at most 3,000. Maybe, if you're westbound Interstate 80 at 75 miles an hour, maybe you're cranking 3,300 a week. But the reality is, these guys are driving their cost down to about $1.70 a mile, and shippers are absolutely exploiting this by utilizing brokers who are willfully ignorant, who are then putting it out to the marketplace and selling the load on that. And this SCOTUS ruling is changing that. But again, this is a big ship, and it's going to take a long time to turn around. It's going to be 5 or 10 years before we see the results. So you fix it today by either the administrator or the FMCSA strongly considering our notice of proposed rulemaking of the 1410 that Dale and I have submitted, or we have the President of the United States can enact an executive order to override this. What we really would like to see, though, is it codified in law through an act of Congress. Now, there's a whole bunch of legislation out there and some really good legislation, right? We've got Delilah's Law that's cleaning up the foreign dispatch problem. We've got the Safer in Transportation Act, again, addressing the foreign dispatch problem. We've got the Ghost Truck Act, again, all good things.
About that, I don't know exactly what that is.
It was just introduced last Thursday by the Florida Congressman Greg Stobie, I believe. That's how you say it, and Representative Dave Taylor out of Ohio. And what it does is it really tries to address but it has some terminology that needs adjustment in it. It addresses foreign tampering with ELDs. Look, if we're going to have a law, we all need to hold to the law.
For sure.
And so there shouldn't be any tampering of ELDs, but it also addresses the foreign dispatch issue.
Okay.
I think with appropriate industry influence, we can articulate what we actually mean to fix. And what we mean to fix is equal treatment across the board.
Right.
But we have to have a profitable compliance. You can't have a driver that should be making $100,000 a year, a $200,000 truck, a $50,000 to $100,000 trailer, and what should be an insurance policy that covers the motoring public and only get 8.75 hours of productivity out of them in a day. Let the professional, the licensed professional, do his job.
Two things. Number one, I thought Dale Prax was the best storyteller I've heard.
He's good, yeah.
I think you might be better.
I'll tell
And
you.
I don't want to tell Dale that, but I'm sitting here just
You'll
like,
hear it now.
I'm like, holy cow. My question for you is, you've done something, in your meetings with Dale in Washington that is rare. You've gotten support not only from Democrats, but Republicans as well.
Yeah.
How are you able to get this coalition together and do this?
Well, this is very much a bipartisan issue.
Of course.
This isn't an us versus them. It's not a red versus blue. It's not even a domestic versus foreign issue. It's a right and wrong issue. Oh. And the reality is when we have someone that makes a terrible mistake and pulls a U-turn on a Florida Turnpike and people die, right? And it becomes a very public story.
100%.
You have to stand back and ask, like, what's the real problem here? Is the problem that the guy doesn't speak English? Well, yeah, I mean, that's maybe a component of it. Is the problem that maybe he doesn't have a appropriate license? That might be a problem. But really what the issue is there's a system in place. And there's a system in place today that is modern day indentured servitude. And what that means is modern day slavery. And what it is foreign owned and operated entities that aren't held to the same standard as compliant domestic entities because they're outside the reach of our governing bodies in America, right? They're operating the surface transportation here in America. And they're doing that by bringing over migrant labor, which is not a bad thing if done appropriately, but we have standards. And you have to meet those standards. And if you don't meet those standards, then we need to fix the system that's allowing this exploitation. The SCOTUS ruling was a great step forward. These legislative attempts are a great step forward. But again, the real problem comes back to, can you be productive and compliant? And you can't do it in 8.75 hours a day when you have your competitor out there running 16, 18 hours a day, racing his E-log nightly. There are 1,000 different approved E-logs. It's estimated that there are 700 to 800 of those that allow for tampering. I mean, you can see the videos all over the internet of this. This is a major problem. And this math is corroborated. David Carell actually briefed the Biden administration back in 2021, back when the push was going on that we have a shortage of drivers. And I want to be clear, a shortage cannot exist in an economy unless there's government intervention limiting a market to work. We don't have a shortage issue. And that's what David Carell suggested. We have a utilization issue.
Yes.
He suggested that only 18 minutes more on that driver's clock allows, or would be the equivalent of adding 80,000 trucks to the marketplace. 18 minutes, 80,000 trucks. Like, so the math is there. But today it's estimated that there are 1 million trucks on the road using E-logs that allow for tampering.
Yeah.
1 million. 1 million guys, like, that's huge. When you're the other 3 million that are limited to 8.75 hours, and you're competing against guys that are running 14, 16, 18 hours a day, that is just an unfair advantage that you cannot overtake. And so we must bring the rules back to the game. Let's equal the playing field, and we do that by updating the legislation.
I mean, I think everyone can agree that we should all be playing by the same set of rules, right?
Equal treatment. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to back up a little bit because you are so passionate about this, and I love hearing you talk about it. So how does a truck driver, then CEO of a 225 truck fleet,
We're a little larger than that, but yeah.
Okay. Well,
we've got other
to a relatively large fleet, large end of a midsize, end up getting involved in this, proposing this legislation, deciding that you were going to be the one to do something to make a change to happen and get those wheels in motion?
Over the last 3 years, I've watched our freight disappear to brokers and scratch my head at how could this happen, right? How is it less expensive for a shipper to give the freight that we were hauling to a intermediary who then is giving it to a fleet with my same costs? And we watched that happen with multiple shippers, and what we realized was they're not playing by the same set of rules. I mean, it was as simple as showing up to those same shippers and watching the trucks being loaded out of those facilities. And you could see that these are handwritten names on the side of the truck, and the driver gets out and clearly has no business being in a truck. And then you go in and you talk to the people on the dock that you know because you've crafted relationships with for 5 and 10 years. And the people on the dock are complaining like, yeah, he doesn't speak a lick of English. And he's gonna be in Nevada tomorrow for delivery. That's a long way to go from Illinois. And it's a solo driver. So like, you know this exists. The other part is my consultant friends that run around to different businesses and essentially show the different markets how to exploit these rules. Yeah. So, and that has to stop. It absolutely has to stop. The game is up. The 60 Minutes article obviously opened up a can, right? And Rob has done some great work on this stuff.
Absolutely.
So has Danielle Chaffin. Yeah. But we've got to continue to push the envelope and expose this fraud, because at the end of the day, you get what you pay for. And the crash that happened down in Florida absolutely had multiple victims. And I would even argue that that driver, that truck, was one of the victims because he had no idea what he was doing. No. And that's not fair. When we stopped this guy back in New Mexico months prior and then let him go, for an out-of-service order for not speaking English. He didn't learn to speak English in 3 months. The problem comes is that we just willfully looked the other way because it was convenient and people died. Now, there are some good things happening, and I have no dog in this fight, but GenLogs is doing some spectacular things. GenLogs is a system of thousands of cameras set up all across U.S. interstates and highways, and enforcement officers can look in real time and use AI to see that these trucks have done thousands of miles a day, and it's only a solo driver, and then compare that against the E-log. But the problem with that comes is that they're only giving them an out-of-service order. Okay, they're going to take him down the road. The guy's going to stop for 10 hours. In 10 hours, he's right back on his way. So we need actual enforcement of shutting these companies down. Just some good old school police work.
Okay, so walk us through the process. When will there be a formal bill introduced? What do you think the time frame of that is? And if people want to show their support, how can they do that?
Yeah, so I've worked with my local legislators, Darren LaHood and Eric Sorensen out of Illinois. But again, I argue this is not a bipartisan thing, right? This is just a right and wrong thing. Yeah. If we're going to have rules, follow the rules. If we're not going to follow the rules, let's throw the rules out and change the rules to something that we will follow. And Dale and I are crafting legislation to introduce, but at the end of the day, we kind of need all of these introduced legislative bills to come together as one to neutralize the playing field so we're starting fresh. But this could be done through a policy change at FMCSA by Mr. Derek Bars, who's done great things for our industry. Absolutely. And I hope he continues to. This could be done at the executive level. If President Trump wants to come in and see that we're truly putting America first and the American worker first, and we are a nation of law and order, with a stroke of the pen, he could put an executive order in place to make a 1410 a very realistic thing. Even give us a trial period of 6 months. But at the end of the day, if we codify it into law through Congress, then it fixes the problem permanently and we don't see it come back. And that right there reduces that competitive edge that the non-compliant companies have exploited while the compliant companies have suffered.
I want to talk about the future because your story, the third generation, you've passed the game, quote unquote, to your son.
Yeah. Oh, he's earning some reins slowly.
He's earning some reins. How do you see the future? Because I hear the passion, and I'm not mesmerized, but I am, because I'm just like, wow, like this is what this is about, you know, and just having your son and the future for him. Like, what are you hoping these conversations that you're having with Mr. Prax, of course, on Capitol Hill, to leave with him and the next iteration of, an industry that, quite frankly, is in your blood. This is all you know.
Yeah, this is what we do. Well, the last 4 years, I've been plagued with diversifying. Yeah. Because trucking has been so difficult to even break even because of the rampant fraud.
No doubt about it.
We've had to diversify drastically. So now we're deep into warehousing and other sectors. What my hope for my son is that he can run a company someday where he can enjoy profitable compliance and predictability, right? He can openly have conversations with legislators and regulators that aren't just policy desk jockeys, but actually understand the industry. And we're starting to see that change. 10, 20 years ago, it was very much us versus them as far as trucking versus Washington, but it's not that anymore. It's us working together to clean this mess up and move forward. So I'd like to see him carry that legacy forward of a profitable yet compliant company that we can move a lot of freight, warehouse a lot of freight for a lot of people, and enjoy the good culture that we've created in our Rockford and Houston facilities.
That's fantastic stuff. Wow. Yeah. Truly.
All right, so if there was one thing to leave our viewers in the audience with, what would it be?
Yeah.
1410, we got that.
1410, absolutely. Pick up the phone and talk about this with your friends. Yeah. Right? So let's get some industry buzz around this. Some drivers are going to argue that their legislators don't care, but they're wrong. If you pick up the phone and you call your legislative office, they do care. Go visit their office. Let them know that you are a compliant truck driver and you want to follow the rules because you don't want to end up behind bars for breaking the rules, but you can't compete against the guys that aren't. And so what we need to do is update a 91-year-old rule in order to allow you to compete and do your job the way that it needs to be. And then again, there's already 3 major sectors that have total hours of service freedom. why can't we let the licensed professional do his job professionally? So talk about this. Let's create a buzz. Let's create a stir. Let's fix the problem, the core problem of our industry, not just treat the symptom, and the symptoms will fall off as we correct the problem.
Zay, that's fantastic stuff, man. It seems like common sense isn't necessarily common until you break it down in this way. It's just like, what are we doing? 1935?
Yeah, 1935. I mean, think about that. You didn't have power steering. Guys would wear gloves while driving a truck because they would literally grind their hands on the wheel. I mean, truck drivers were muscular men.
Yeah.
They had 2 sticks to shift. They didn't have air conditioning. Imagine trying to dispatch a driver today. You worked in brokerage. Imagine trying to sell a truckload to El Paso in July with no air conditioning in 1935.
I would be done.
Like, you literally handed a driver a wad of cash, sent him to the coast, and said, call me when you get there. As early as the 1980s.
Yeah.
Like 1935 was a wildly different time. A guy broke down on a 2-lane road. He fixed his truck before he was up and running. So we can fix this. We absolutely can. We need to fix this because this is the core of all of our problems. Let's not just treat the symptom. Let's fix the core of it, and that is a 1410.
A 1410. This has been an amazing, amazing segment. Zach, seriously, thank you for being here. I'm going to ask that you come on With the Truck again next month.
All right, I look forward to it.
We got to get
Maybe we'll
that
talk
one.
actual trucking stuff.
No, I think
right?
so too. No, but this was a great precursor for it. Where can we find more information about what you and the rest of the team at Meiborg companies are currently doing as well?
Welcome to reach out to me if you'd like. Facebook, LinkedIn, email is zmeiborg@meiborginc.com. Dale Prax is quite available as well. His company is Freight Validate. Feel free to talk to us, to stir a buzz about it. But otherwise, like I said, call your local legislator and see what we can get moving as far as codifying it, and we'll continue to move forward. I do ask if you're working for a company and you know that your company is using fraudulent e-logs, report it. You know, and you could report it simply by taking a video of it and publishing it to Facebook the way many people have in the past, and that will really create a stir in our industry of getting the fraud out of trucking, because this divergent
Is there an anonymous
supply
way to
curve.
report it? Is there not a new
I
portal?
felt that we put out an article the other day about a portal. It may have been for fraud, but I'm pretty sure this can coincide with it as well, that you can upload this anonymously to be able to be like almost a whistleblower per se.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people that have done it already through Facebook or whatnot. Yeah.
Again, Zach Meiborg, CEO
Thank you.
of
For your
Meiborg
take
Companies.
and thoughts on this, yeah, it's been great.
Fantastic interview. This was awesome. We are going to have Mr. John.